Welcome, everybody. This is Sweet Tea, CLEs and Connections, starting your legal career in North Carolina. My name is Sheila Spence. I'm this year's NCBA Young Lawyers Division Chair. I want to welcome you to this awesome event co-hosted between the Young Lawyers Division and the minorities in the profession. I am currently working in-house. I'm senior counsel at Jump. It's a wholly owned subsidiary of SAS based in Cary, and I'm practicing all things privacy, AI, and commercial contracts. I'm going to be the moderator this evening for this particular panel. And before we get started, I just wanted to shout out the co-planners for this event. Thank you so much to Aaron Gaddis, Sherelle Harris, Alex Quinn, the bar staff, and everybody that put this wonderful event together. Without further ado, I would love to introduce our panelists as well. Maybe just tell us a little bit about yourself, your name, your practice areas, and your involvement within bar associations, if any. So I'm just going to call out names in no particular order. Tiffany, welcome.
Hi, thanks, Sheila. I'm Tiffany Burba. I'm a partner at Parker Poe in downtown Raleigh. My practice involves technology transactions, commercial contracts, privacy, and some media sponsorship type work. I represent companies across many different industries, but a lot of it is in the life sciences space. In terms of my involvement at the Bar Association, I'm the incoming chair of the intellectual property section this year, and I've been very involved on that council for the last several years with Sherelle, who is also involved on the council. And outside of work, you'll usually find me trying to organize pro bono projects, whether in my role at the firm as chair of our pro bono committee or through my involvement with the Pro Bono Coordinators Network that's statewide.
Thank you, Tiffany. Terry.
Hi, everyone. My name's Terry Nelson. I am currently in-house at Thermo Fisher Scientific. I work under one of our company's PPD as a generalist, so handling a little bit of everything right now. But before that, I worked at Syneos Health, mostly doing commercial contracts. I worked at the state bar for a little bit, and then I was a prosecutor and did general civil litigation at Cranfield Sumner. So a little bit of experience doing a few things. As far as involvement, I am heavily involved in the Association for Corporate Counsel, our Raleigh Triangle chapter, and I'm the chair of our Career Development Committee and a member of our Pro Bono Council.
Awesome. Thanks,
Mhm.
Terry. Sydney, welcome.
Thank you, Sheila. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Sydney Mentor. I'm Senior Counsel of Employment at Advanced Auto Parts, where I've been for about 6 years. So all things labor and employment is pretty much my space. Prior to that, I did a little bit of work at several different firms, one here in Raleigh, well, two in Raleigh and one in Charlotte. In terms of my involvement with the bar, current co-chair of the MIP's Corporate Counsel Subcommittee, and then also past board member for the North Carolina Bar Association and the foundation. So glad to be here. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks to you all. So now we're going to just dive into some of the questions, ask you guys about your experience and your recommendations on how to stay connected within NC. For those of you online, if you have a question, feel free to put it in the chat and I will look at those at the end. So we'll try to reserve some time at the end to get to your questions. So, starting out, how did you begin building your professional network when you didn't know anyone here? This is for any panelists.
I'll start, Sheila. First thing was, I remember when I first got to law school, they talked about your classmates are your first potential clients, the people that are, that you can collaborate with. So I'd say building those relationships there with your colleagues, obviously, the people in your year, the upperclassmen, even some of the incoming folks as you kind of matriculated through law school, even the professors as well. I know I've networked with professors. A lot of times they are tapped into different networks that you may or may not be aware of. And sometimes you just kind of got to ask or have that relationship, and that can be helpful. Also internship managers. There's several managers who I worked with in law school while I was an intern, who I've kept in contact with now for many years. And some of them have helped me get roles or helped me get speaking opportunities when I was in private practice and things of that nature. And also the dean of the law school. I mean, he or she, whatever law school you're at, is an important person. They've probably got a lot of contacts. You can tap into their network as well. And then I'd say, just joining law groups like the North Carolina Bar Association, the Wake County Bar Association. I'm a member of the National Employment Law Council, which is a group for employment lawyers across the country. That one's really good. And I'd say just attending networking events when you get the opportunity to do so would be the things that I would say.
I'd say in law school, I tried to do things that I was interested in. You're there to study and, do well in your classes, but I also tried to be involved with like our student bar association, trial teams, things like that. If you're out when I graduated and I started practice, I kind of tried to continue that where I was getting involved with, the North Carolina Bar Association with different things or um, joining different committees. And also just taking a genuine interest in the people that were around me, especially people who were, more senior than me, finding out, how they got to be where they were, taking opportunities to have conversations with them, and then genuinely following up with people, if I saw something on their LinkedIn or something that they were involved in, commenting or, reaching out to them and messaging them. That was one way I think when I didn't know people. But I agree with what Sydney said. You have to you're always growing your network, going to conferences. I invested in myself. Last year, I attended the Corporate Council Women of Color Conference, and that was something that I didn't, get sponsored by my job to do initially. So I registered for myself because I wanted to, broaden my network. Sydney mentioned NELC. I went to that this year and participated in the in-house career accelerator program. So I look for opportunities to connect with like-minded people who are also, you know, set on a certain path that is similar to where I want to. But I think, when you're a new lawyer, sometimes you don't necessarily know what your path is. I think you graduate from law school, but you don't necessarily know exactly what you want to see yourself doing. So I think just being patient with yourself too and realizing that it's going to take some time sometimes for people. Some people know, and then some people have to kind of figure out exactly what they want to do. And so if that's you, then I think having conversations with people out of just genuine interest is really important in building your network.
Agree. And something I want to point out or highlight that you mentioned, Terry, was about social media. Um, LinkedIn, I think, is an excellent resource to start building your professional network. If you're a little bit shy or introverted, I've stalked everybody's pages. You've probably seen me before. I'll click your page to see who's speaking on a panel. I'll try to add you. I'll push like, I'll add a comment if necessary. But I think that's a great way to start getting to know folks as well before actually meeting them in person. Like just utilize everything that's available to you.
One other thought I could offer, and that worked well for me, was getting involved in community service and pro bono work pretty early on whenever you move somewhere new. So I'm coming from a background of having gone to law school out of state, and then I started my career at a different firm in a different city, and I had no connections to Raleigh when I decided to take this current job and move up this way. But something that helped me get ingrained pretty quickly was reaching out to pro bono directors and legal service organizations to see what clinics I could attend. Clinics are a great way, especially in-person ones, to meet not only the service providers, but also the other lawyer volunteers from many different firms or many different companies who may be attending. And that way you kind of get to know each other organically by working together on a project that's meaningful to all of you. And it feels a little bit more authentic sometimes than just going to a networking event and handing your business card out a bunch of times. There's a way to do that in an authentic way, but if you're like me and you feel awkward about that, doing the pro bono route and attending events where you're actually doing an activity together can help as well.
Yeah, that's the perfect segue into my next question for you all, which is what role did like CLEs or bar sections, other bar associations, any kind of local events play into meeting new people and helping you grow your network? I know, Tiffany, you just mentioned doing pro bono work. One thing that I can think about is joining NCBA section. So I'm a part of the corporate counsel section and the privacy and data security section. But once you join those sections, you can always participate in a smaller committee. And I think that helped me to grow my network. Like whenever you're on a big council call with 20 people, it may be a little bit difficult to speak up and share your ideas. But if you then join a smaller committee, CLE committee or pro bono committee or whatever it is, and it's less folks, I think that you have the chance to authentically grow your network a bit more. Anybody else? I'll say the question again because I know I started talking a bit, but what role did CLEs, bar associations, or local events play in meeting people and helping you to grow your network?
I think it played a pretty big role for me. I got involved in the IP section very early on in my career, maybe a month after I arrived at the firm. And I was able to go to pretty much every council meeting that has transpired in the last 9 years since that first one that I attended. And it's the same, 20 to 30 people that are at every meeting, and you get to know one another fairly well. And that helps you with name recognition in your industry if your firm or your company is involved in things like the best lawyers list or other peer-reviewed accolades or recognitions that require other people in the legal community to know your name and to know your subject matter expertise. So that's a great way to get to know people outside of your company or your employer. And then in terms of other creative ideas, some of the law schools have mentorship programs. They're not always every year, but for example, Campbell, I know in years past, has done a mentorship program for students and new lawyers within their first couple of years of practice. And so when I first arrived, I joined as a mentee for 2 years and then later came back and became a mentor. And the people that I interacted with on both sides of the aisle there are people that are still in my network that I see regularly and that I can talk to about, my career and issues that come up within my practice. So I think that's a good way to get to know folks.
Agree. Okay.
So
What?
oh, Sheila, can I add to that one?
Please do.
Yeah, so I mean, I think attending CLEs is or it's very important. I think from a different perspective, experienced lawyers really like talking about their careers. So I think from that perspective, it's really good, particularly when I was like newer to the practice, going to CLEs and just talking to people, asking them about their practice, listening to kind of their stories and how they got to where they were. And for particularly for those folks who I kind of wanted to emulate their career, I'm like, okay, this person is doing what I would like to be doing in 10 years. Let me talk to him or let me talk to her and kind of figure out kind of how they got there. And I think people's guards are down because at CLEs, a lot of times people are not necessarily having suits on. They may just be in more casual clothing and they're more likely, more apt to just discuss casual things, if you will, or informal things. So I found I had some success doing that. And also, as a new practitioner, attending those CLEs, I was kind of able to see people in a professional setting, how people like more experienced lawyers, kind of how they roll, right? That was important for me early in my career, just kind of see like, how do I need to conduct myself at these events? Do I want to be the person that's talking a lot? Do I want to kind of fall back? Like, just kind of where do I fit in the group? So I'll add that as well.
Yeah, that's helpful. Don't talk too much. And I just want to answer Sydney's question. Should you talk too much? The answer is no. Talk enough, but not too much at these events. Okay, so what do you all look for when mentoring or hiring someone new in the local market here in North Carolina?
I would say from hiring interns in the past, I look for someone who seems teachable, who seems humble, like, you know, we come to law school, you're smart already, but there are still things that you don't know. And even in practice, you're constantly learning. So someone who you can tell that if you were to give them some type of feedback, that they would be open to it, receptive to it. Also look for someone who is willing to try to find answers on their own, before coming with questions. I think that's really important. It's somebody who has an intellectual curiosity to figure out things, when they come across things they may not know, who at least is going to look into it first. And then someone who is just pleasant, I think, to work with. We spend a lot of time, at work. Especially when I was at a law firm, we spend a lot of time, it's not just 9 to 5. So finding someone who, if you're going to be around them for a long period of time, that, they have emotional and emotional, EQ. So I think those are three things that I would say that I look for in a person that I would hire as an intern or as a colleague.
I love it. And what you said, Terry, reminds me of my three things too. Can you do the job? Will you do the job? And do you fit in? Like, I think you gave examples of all of those. If you're a law student or young lawyer, you most likely can do the job. But will you do it in this environment? Can you work under high pressure with limited instructions? And hybrid environment and in-person environment, all these different things. And then do you fit in? Like you said, are you pleasant to be around if we have to work late hours or all these social events? These are all things to think about as you spend a lot of time at work. Hopefully not all your time, but a decent amount of time will be working. So good points.
I totally agree with Sheila's question. Will you do the job? That's something that I think is top of mind for me when I'm hiring, first year associates or junior associates on my team. It's important to me that the person understands and is able to reflect the understanding that we are in a service-oriented profession. So we are completing tasks and doing projects for our clients in furtherance of their business goals. And a lot of times, especially if you're at a firm, you're getting called because you have the subject matter expertise or the capacity in terms of time and depth on your bench to solve problems that are really difficult for other folks to solve within the time period provided. And so it's important to me that people in my team know that we're not just working for the sake of checking off our own personal to-do lists and going home. We are completing those tasks to help the client with their end goal. And sometimes that means you have to stay late or you have to see the task from start to finish, even after you feel like you've done your part and you deserve your kudos. You have to keep in mind that it's really a service provider role to your clients. And so people who really understand that, I think, do very well in this sort of employment circumstance.
I agree with that, Tiffany. And I'll just kind of from an in-house perspective, because I worked at a firm for some time, different firms, and I've been in-house for 6 years as well. And that same sentiment is true for us and our internal stakeholders as well. I mean, they are our clients, they are our customers. We've got to provide service for them. And sometimes it's just the actual legal advice or the business advice, or sometimes it's just being there to listen to them and whatever they may be going through and trying to walk them through the tough period. So I just wanted to double down on that. But in terms of what I'll be looking for is willingness to seek out an opportunity, just sometimes just raising your hand. And I've got opportunities when I was younger, earlier in my career, just because I raised my hand and said I would do it. I wasn't always confident in it necessarily. It may be something new for me, but I'm like, you know what? If somebody else can do it, I can do it, right? And if I don't know it right now, I can learn it, and I can figure it out. And so I think just raising your hand, being willing to put yourself out there is important. Um, Being willing to email somebody, being willing to reach out to somebody on LinkedIn, as Sheila said. I mean, LinkedIn is it's so easy to do that. When I was in law school, date myself a bit, LinkedIn wasn't really a thing. So you kind of had to reach out via email or see somebody in person, but now you can just send somebody a LinkedIn connection You can send them a message and you can kind of get the dialogue going that way. Another skill I'll be looking for is just strong writing skills. And I've been able to supervise multiple interns over the years, and those that are really, really good at writing, I mean, that always stands out to me, and particularly in-house when they are able to write to a person who may be at a very high level of a company where I don't want a memo that's 10 pages, right? I want you to get to the point quickly. This is executive. They don't have time to read, all of this. So people that can communicate in that way is important. And then I say lastly, the ability just to follow up. We're all very busy. Early in my career, I know I always looked at it if I was wanting to speak to somebody that was more senior. I took it upon myself to reach out to them and then follow up. They're busy. It may not be, people sometimes take it personally if somebody doesn't respond to them quickly or they don't get back to them. Like, reach out again. Like, you're the one that's seeking out the advice. You need the help. And even now, I've been doing this for a minute. There are people that are more senior than me. If I want their time, I'm still going to play that same role where I reach out. And if I need to follow up, I'll do that. And I won't take it personally. So, yeah.
Excellent advice. Yeah, don't take it personally. I know you guys are probably like me, swamped with emails on a daily basis. So sometimes I click them, I read it, I mean to respond and forgot. So yeah, feel free to follow up reasonably. Follow up reasonably. Um, so going off of that, how can young lawyers stand out positively in these professional spaces? What are you guys' thoughts? We talked about work a little bit, how you need to have good writing skills. But when it comes to networking, how can they stand out?
Go ahead, Tiffany.
Thanks, Sydney. We did the mutual unmute at the same time. Two things come to mind for me. One is being prepared, and the other is being curious. So if you know what type of event you're going to, for example, if it's a reception hosted by a company or a firm, you might consider looking up some news on that firm or that company's website and learning about recent deals or recent matters that were interesting or what's going on with that company in the news. Or if you know that you're going to an NCBA event hosted by one of the sections, you could go on the section website, look at the section leadership, and look up some of the folks that will be speaking there and come prepared to talk to them about what their practice is like or something you saw on their LinkedIn. Other times when it's just sort of a general networking event, being prepared to me sometimes looks like having your elevator pitch, right? When you're meeting someone, saying who you are, what you're interested in, and what you want to get out of this event. For me, I like it when people have business cards. Folks have different opinions on that. Some people prefer the virtual sort of QR code on their phone, but I really like having a physical business card that I can write notes on in the back or take home and either choose to use or not use, depending on how the interaction went. So that's really important to me. And then leading with curiosity. Um, we had a reception at NCBA a couple months ago where there were tables for each of the sections and the types of law. And a lot of people came to the IP section and just sort of stood there and said, I don't know anything about IP, which is fine. You don't have to know anything about IP, but a better way to approach that would be to say, hey, I've never taken a class on this. I would love to hear what you do in your day-to-day practice or like what interests you most about IP. So you can sort of flip it around and express curiosity, and that gets the conversation going.
Agree. To add on to be curious, I would say be helpful. One thing that I do, being a part of a lot of these different bar associations, is sometimes I'll get there early or I'll stay late and I'll say, hey, do you need a hand? And as I'm helping you, with this tablecloth, also I had this question. Try to keep, try to go in as easy as it can for you. Other things that I think about, that are less on the spot, but just take a little bit more of being intentional is reaching out to the organizers ahead of time. I know that when I was a law student, there was a conference that I wanted to attend. I was poor with no money, and I reached out and said, "Hey, I really need to come. I need to be here. I can't pay, but can I help you? Can I do the sign-in desk or something? I will pay you with my time." And they wrote back and said yes and got me a ticket to fly out there in a hotel room. So, not that every conference will work like that, but you never know unless you try. Try to be helpful. There's still ways that you can give back and be helpful, even as a law student or a young professional. You don't have to just come out with 20 years of knowledge and then folks will seek after you.
So I'd say couple things, few things. Always dress the part, you know. So I think with a lot of virtual webinars and things of that nature, I think people are a lot more kind of casual. But I think when you show up at an event, you need to look like you're an attorney. You need to look like you are there and you mean business, right? People are paying attention to that. They may not say it, particularly when you're new, because one of the reasons you may stand out maybe because of the way you're dressed. That may be something like, oh, that person, they had a nice suit on or a nice that. Did and that might be a reason somebody might wants to talk to you and get to know you better. So I say that part. If given an opportunity to speak, I say you should take it. Again, I already kind of touched on that earlier. Don't want to belabor that, but just it's important. And I think that's how, to somebody mentioned intellectual curiosity, I think that kind of goes to that point. If it's an area that you're interested in, that's kind of how I got into employment law. I was doing really primarily workers' comp and some premises liability. And I had a conversation with somebody that was a former manager when I was at an internship. And he mentioned that every corporation needs a good employment lawyer. And I was like, okay. And so I started talking to him, and then that got my wheels rolling, turning, if you will. And I started talking to other people, getting connected. And then before you know it, I'm out here giving presentations on employment law. Now, did I know a lot about it? No, but what I did know was my presentation. I didn't know a lot, but I knew what was on my slides, and I just kind of had to get comfortable in going with that. And then I'd say lastly, just work in the room. If you're going to be in the room, be in the room, right? Talk to people. Even if you're just saying, today I'm going to speak to one person, I'm going to meet one person, I'm going to talk to one person, I'm going to get one person's contact information. I'm going to make a genuine relationship or begin building a genuine relationship with one person. Or you might say, I'm going to talk to five people, whatever your goal may be, but go in strategically because otherwise you're just kind of wasting your time, being a bump on the log, if you will. So.
And I agree with everything that was said. I think if I would add something else, it would just be to be friendly. And what I mean by that is, whether you're introvert, extrovert, you're always going to go to some of these events and find someone not talking to anyone or, you know, someone who seems like they're out of place. I think being the person that goes up and introduces yourself first to maybe somebody who is also not talking to someone is a good way to kind of get started, warm yourself up. And then I think Tiffany touched on this too, but having questions prepared, that's really helped me in the past of like, if you're going to go talk to people, know like what's something that you would want to know about them regarding the event or just maybe their career in general. Having that already in your mind really helps with conversation if you are someone that's, more apprehensive about networking, forced networking spaces, because I think it happens in many different ways, but that would be it.
Thanks, Terry. So we talked about how to network and what to do at networking events to stand out. But what about after? So after the event is over, you've made that initial connection. Sydney, you said you only need to do one, but maybe you got two or three business cards at the event. What do you do after that? What can young lawyers do to authentically keep those connections going that you made at the event? You met one time, but you want to be able to keep it going. So, what are you guys' thoughts?
I think we already talked about, adding people on LinkedIn. I think that's a good start is to connect with them on LinkedIn. If you do a post and you happen to get a picture with them, you could tag them in it if you wanted to, but I think I would first start off there. Also, I would say you know, just because you met someone doesn't mean that you have to always follow up. I think, if say you met 5 people, maybe you really connected with 2 of those people. I think maybe send those people a message, or even if you sent all of them a message, you could maybe say, it was great meeting you. Glad we're staying connected when you add them. But if there's some people that you would like to have a follow-up conversation with because you think, there was something that you all really connected on, or you have further questions that you want to ask about an area of law that they practice, I think then do that. But I don't think that every person that you meet at a networking event, you necessarily need to get lunch or coffee with. I think you just have to be discerning about, who to connect with further. That's my perspective on that. But and so I would think that if you met someone and you feel like you guys really connected, then follow up and see if there's a time that you guys can either do virtual coffee or meet in person. But staying connected on LinkedIn, following those people's posts and, commenting when they get a new job or they've presented on something, I think that's a good way to stay connected in a professional space. And if it's something where you met them at events and you'll see them in the future, going up to them, asking them how things are going, naturally, I think that's a good way to, continue to build that professional rapport with people.
I agree. Yeah, you don't have to reach out to everybody whose business cards that you gathered, but like Terry said, if there are a few that really stand out to you, reach out. Something that I used to do is I would write on the back of the business card, not right in front of the people, but after they left, something about them. If they said they had kids that are going to college or their dog's name or something personal happening in their life, because I care and I want to follow up and I want to have something to follow up on. So make sure that you're paying attention to what's important to that person, so that you can have good follow-up conversations, whether or not it's in on LinkedIn or like Terry said, maybe you meet them at another event in the future. You'd have something to continue the conversation on.
Something I found effective being on the other side of that, when people reach out to me and they meet me at an event, is when people reach out to me about similar events or about other news happening. So if I met someone at an IP section event and then a month later on LinkedIn, they reach out and say, "Hey, I saw you at the IPCLE in Cary. This other one is happening in Charlotte. Are you planning to attend? Would be great to catch up if you are planning to attend." And even if you don't go and physically see them, at least that was another touch point, and they know that you're keeping it top of mind, which is nice. I also like it when people reach out with volunteer opportunities or speaking opportunities. Um, Something as simple as saying, "Hey, we're having a lunch at the law school about IP. Would you be interested in joining, or could you introduce me to anyone at your firm that would be interested in joining?" So reaching out and asking for an introduction to someone else to further expand that network can work as well.
So obviously LinkedIn, I agree with that. I think LinkedIn is a powerful tool. One thing that somebody recently with me met at an event, and we were talking about some employment law issue, and this student followed up with me because she had written a law review article that we had discussed, and she sent me the law review article that was published, and I thought that was a nice touch, and it was like it made sense because it was something that I was interested in. It was AI and employment law, which AI is everywhere, right? So that was a nice touch. Also think just checking in periodically just to check in, not asking for anything, just saying, "Hey, I was just thinking about you," or "Hey, I just wanted to check in with you, see how things are going," or "I saw you posted this on LinkedIn, just wanted to reach out." Because I do think that on the other side of receiving those emails, sometimes it can feel like people only reach out when they want something from you. That doesn't feel good, right? So don't be the person that's always doing that. I mean, us on the other side, we're busy and we have things going on, but we understand that as a law student or a younger attorney, you're trying to build your network. And so we are cool with you reaching out, but if you always reaching out, you always asking for something, then me personally, I don't think that's cool at all. And I want to give a kind of a story about a lady when I was working as an intern. Just to give you an example, full circle example, I was an intern at a company in Raleigh, And I ended up going, graduating, working at a firm and whatnot. Hadn't heard from her. And then I moved to another firm in Charlotte. This was probably like 5 years later. And randomly out the blue, she just like emailed me. She was like, "Hey, Sydney, what's going on? I'm doing an HR summit at my company. Would love for you to participate." I'm like, "All right, cool." So mind you, no business, like this is nothing that I'm getting paid for or anything like that, but it's just a solid thing to do. It's a great speaking opportunity, as I think Tiffany mentioned. So I said, yeah, I'll do it. So I come to Raleigh. I was living in Charlotte at the time, and I do this summit. She follows up like, "Hey, you did a great job. I really appreciate it." Then I don't hear anything from her for like 4 years. So I'm in my office at another firm in Raleigh, and it's probably like maybe 4 o'clock p.m. I get a random call, and I'm like, "Hello, this is Sydney." She's like, "This is so and so." I'm like, "Oh, what's up? How you doing? It's been a while." She's like, "Yeah, I'm working at this company. I'm managing all the labor and employment work. At this time, I'm at a firm, right? So I'm looking for clients." And she's like, "Hey, I know somebody at your office, but I want to give this work to you." And this was like a national firm, national company with operations in like 50 states. This was a huge deal for me, right? And this all came from me being an intern, me being curious, striking up a relationship with her as an intern, and then doing some free work for her. And then finally, like 8 or 9 years later, ended up being like a huge client for me in a paying situation. So just as a full circle moment, I just wanted to share that.
Wow, that's a powerful story. I love that. Thanks for sharing that. And you never know, people are always watching you. That's my biggest takeaway, even as an intern. So make sure that you're doing your best work, giving it your all, and you never know what you may get in return. Okay, so what's one unspoken norm about practicing law in North Carolina that newcomers should know? Are there any?
I think one that I would say is that people talk to each other. So you can have a good reputation or you could have, a poor reputation, and you never know who knows who. And so North Carolina to me, from the coast to the mountains is pretty small. I think our bars, the state bar, I think is fairly small. And so I think you just never know who knows who. And so it's important to treat everyone like with respect, kindness, and also, because of that, don't talk about people to other people, because you just never know how that stuff will come back. And kind of similar to what someone mentioned about, in law school, these are the people that you're going to be working with, potentially. And so I think the same thing happens in practice is that, it's a fairly small bar. And so just be very careful about the type of reputation you want to have as a person and as a lawyer.
Yes, agree. That is definitely important. Reputation matters. So don't burn bridges unless you burn them all down and start your own. I don't know. Okay, what mistakes do you make or did you make early on, if you made any, while you were networking or either starting your career that you think could have been avoided?
I'll start there. I think I cast too broad of a net. Like I was just gung ho and I wanted to meet everybody and make all the connections. And I'll start because I was in private practice. So from a networking perspective, I'm like trying to get clients, right? So I'm trying to meet everybody, trying to make all these connections, and like I was spending so much time like doing all this networking stuff on top of actually doing the work that there's a lot of hours I was putting in. And in hindsight, I think it was good for me, but also for my mental capacity, probably wasn't great. Like I was just perpetually tired. And part of it is just being in a, demanding career and learning a new area and trying to figure it all out. But also I was putting additional pressure on myself. So I would say put limits on that. Like I think one year I think it was like I had like 500 hours of like what I would consider like non-billable time, like networking, speaking, writing articles, all of that, right? On top of billing the hours. that was for me, that was just way too much. And I could have been more strategic about it and said, all right, I want to meet these people or I want to meet folks that are doing these types of things. And I'm going to cap that at 200 hours, all right? Which means how many hours per week or per month and do it that way and be more strategic. I didn't give myself the grace to do that because I wanted it all at one time. So I feel like I was a little bit too ambitious. So that's what I would say. I'd be more strategic if I had to do it again.
Yeah, that's wonderful advice. I was at another bar event where a guy kind of summarized that issue as being a rabbit yeser. And I think I have that even to this day. I have a problem with saying no. So start now, thinking about how not to cast your net too wide, but think about opportunities that are really important to you. It's okay to do one or two things, but yeah, you don't need to go to all 10 events. Um, I think that's really good advice. Anybody else, any mistakes that you've made early on? And this is our last formal question. So for everybody in the audience, please do start thinking of your questions because I'm going to open up to you in a second.
So this is probably a mistake to avoid for the audience who are law students and new lawyers. I think for me, I was so focused on, doing my schoolwork and getting the right jobs and going to the right networking events and putting my head down and just sort of working on things that for the first couple years, I neglected building relationships with my peers and maintaining relationships with my law school alumni or creating relationships with my fellow associate class. And I think that was not the right move and kind of put me at a real disadvantage because when I began networking and making relationships, all of my uh, new connections are new. I've only known folks for a couple of years, whereas I look down the hall at some of my colleagues who maybe went to law school in North Carolina, they went to college in North Carolina, they have 20-year friendships with other lawyers in town, and it's a much deeper and more enriching relationship that they've been able to maintain over many years. So I would encourage folks to look around at their peers and not work hard at the expense of those relationships around you so that it's not harder for you later on when you're making new connections.
Agree. Yeah, that's really solid advice.
I would say, myself, I think, your first job out of law school, sometimes you're hired to do a specific thing, and it may not be the thing that you're really interested in. And so I would say I wish I would have taken more control of my career sooner. You can definitely do the thing that you've been hired to do, but if you know that there's something else that you have an interest in, you know, like we've said, talk to other people who may be in your firm or who might be in your local bar who are doing the thing that you want to do and get advice or how you could maybe pivot or do that type of work. I know somebody who was hired to do, workers' comp and they really wanted to do something else. So they volunteered to write blogs for that particular section and they were volunteered to do extra research for them. I think, just the practice of law is so broad that so I've heard some people say that they don't necessarily like practicing law, and I think you've spent a lot of time in law school and in your career so far that you deserve to enjoy what it is that you're doing. I don't think you'll always enjoy every moment of what you're doing, but if you know that there's something that you really would enjoy doing, start exploring that a lot sooner is what I would say based off of what I've done.
Agree. And with that, we now have time for your questions. Anybody have questions? Not everybody all at once. Hey, Isabella.
Forgot my computer was on like the little screen, sorry. But in your early careers or in law school, how much of a difference did networking have on like landing those first roles?
Okay, let me repeat the question to everybody. Isabella is asking, when you were in law school, how much did networking have as an impact for getting your first role? I can share. I think it had a major impact. Um, for me, my first job after law school was working at Blue Cross and Blue Shield. And even at that time, I was networking, but at a smaller scale, I guess, at the way that Sydney mentioned, I was mainly networking with my professors, telling them what I was up to, what kind of roles I was interested in. When you start applying for jobs, you need like letters of recommendations or references. And so then I started using all of these professors. I'm like, hey, I'm going to use you, which by the way, definitely let folks know if you're going to use them as a reference because they then reach out and email them on the spot. So I think it really helped put me over the edge when it came down to the interview. So yeah, I would recommend continuing to network with each other, with your professors as a slow start to helping you get your first job. Anybody else want to take a stab at it?
Yeah, I'll take a stab at it. So I think networking is always important. I've kind of got a story. I think these stories kind of help illustrate points. So, I mean, I'd say first off, I mean, trying to have good grades. I mean, that was for me, that was very important. And being just an approachable person. But so I had an opportunity, and this is another full circle moment with the MIP, where I got selected by my school to go interview with firms and corporations. And the way it worked, there probably were maybe like, I think each school in North Carolina sent like 3 or 4 students or whatever. And so I was pretty confident going into it, and I feel like I did my thing doing the interviews. But the way it worked, you had to be number one on a corporation or firm's list. If you were number two on 5 lists, you didn't get an internship. So obviously I didn't know this, but at the end of the day, I didn't get an internship. So one of the guys who was on the MIP committee was like, hey man, you were really impressive. Like, you were number two on several lists. Like, I'm sorry you didn't get an intern. So I'm like, yeah, I'm thinking to myself, yeah, me too, man. But thank you, I appreciate that. And so like maybe a week later, he calls me. He's like, hey, you still looking for an internship? I'm like, yeah. He's like, well, I can't pay you what some of these other companies can pay you, but I went back because I was impressed by you and talked to my VP, and now I have a budget to bring you on as an intern. So he brought me on as an intern, and I was able to get paid and have that entire experience. And then he's somebody who I was kept in contact with throughout the entirety of my career. He ended up being a North Carolina Bar Association president. Like, he's just been a really, really good mentor. So I know that's kind of a long story, but I just wanted to kind of share that.
I really appreciate that story, and I think sometimes stories are easier to remember. And I'd like to share one as well that I often share at our mentorship events for IP. When I was a 1L in law school, our school offered a no credit seminar that met twice a week for like an hour each time. And it was called something like Professionalism in Practice. And it was taught by a local lawyer who owned her own small firm. And she just sort of gave advice about what it means to practice law. She gave some sneak peeks to the ethical rules. And it was really just sort of like a professional development seminar. But a lot of people didn't want to take it their 1L fall because they're so worried about grades and they don't want anything distracting. And it was for 0 credits. But the small group of us that did take it established a really good relationship with her. And I found myself keeping in contact with her probably monthly, and she would bring me to bar association events and we would catch up often. And then my 1L summer, I was lined up to intern with a judge. And a couple days before I was supposed to start the internship, he had a medical episode. Luckily, he, survived and recovered, but he wasn't able to serve on the bench for the whole summer. And so my position was terminated. And I was reaching out to my network, asking folks, like, what do you recommend I do? Should I try to get a research position? Should I just travel and try again next year? And she was one of the people I reached out to for advice. And she said, oh my gosh, I'll just hire you. Like, you can be my intern. And so, a couple days later, I'm working at her firm. And I never would have expected her to offer that. And I didn't even really ask for it. But you never know when a connection like that will pay off after you've had an authentic networking experience with someone.
Yeah, thank you. That's super helpful to know.
Yeah, I'll say I have a similar story to Sydney. I did the MIP program too. And one of the firms that I interviewed with, they put me as number two. So I walked away with not having one, but then someone, dropped out and I was able to get that position and I went back my 2L and my 3L summer. Yep. Yeah, 2L and 3L summer. And unlike, there's a lot of firms, they give offers, right after you've interned. But this firm didn't know if they were going to be able to hire anyone or not. But I kept in touch with the person who was in charge of associates. And so she and I would get lunch from time to time. And I remember she asked me, like, what are you thinking about doing? And honestly, I was just thinking about the bar exam. So I didn't really tell her that I was looking for a job or anything. I was just talking more so about the bar. And then she sent me an offer letter like a few weeks after our lunch. So I think
Oh,
just keeping in touch and, doing a good job. I know like after each summer, I would pay attention and talk to people in the office. If someone said like in passing, like their favorite candy was this, I'm huge on like thank you notes. And I would like maybe put like their favorite candy with it or something. We had this one partner who said that one day he hoped to have a Tesla. I bought him like a Tesla Hot Wheel and put it on his desk with his thank you card. Just like things like that that people remember you by and shows that you've been listening and enjoyed the connections that you've made with them throughout the summer. I think that that really plays I mean, it adds up, towards the end when you're looking for a role, but you just never know. Like all of these stories that we've all shared, you never know the impact that you've made on someone until it manifests in some way. So yeah, that would be my story.
that's awesome. Thanks, Terry. When you said you bought a Tesla, I was like, wait a minute, what? But then you said it was a Hot Wheel.
Toy,
Okay,
yeah.
that makes sense. Um, okay, we have a question in the chat from Hope. She says, how do you recommend finding internships outside of law career services? And a side note, this has been incredibly helpful. Thanks for tuning in, Hope. So the question is, how do you recommend finding internships outside of your law school career services? I would say LinkedIn, circling back to that. I follow that. I also, what's the other thing that's out there for internships? All of this informal networking that we've just been talking about, going to those events, not necessarily asking for a job, but being open in case one is offered to you. I'd recommend that too. Sydney, were you gonna chime in?
Yeah, I actually didn't get my first internship through my career services at all. I mean, when I was in law school, I was just applying. I was just like, there was no, like, I had to actually send, like, written, like, I had to mail resumes to like firms and things of that nature. So I had like a spreadsheet and like I was just sending them out. So I say just casting a wide net, like Sheila said, speaking to people, seeing what's available, going to LinkedIn, going to Indeed, and just talking to people, right? Because there are opportunities out there, and sometimes people in your church, people that you might even be thinking about, right? Like, or somebody if you have a kid that plays sports, or if you play sports, talking to those folks and just seeing what's available because there are oftentimes opportunities. Now, they may not be paid, and I think that just depends on kind of what you're looking for. But if you're looking for legal opportunities, then there's a lot out there. But you just got to cast, in my opinion, you just got to cast a wide net. And you've got to be open to have an open mind. I think sometimes folks are like, oh, I want to do IP law, for example. I want to do employment law. That might be a little bit too narrow, particularly in the market that we're in now. It's just like I want legal experience, period. I would like to have, like when you're buying a house, you're like, what are the things you absolutely want? And then what are the things that you're like, I'm okay if I have this or I don't have it. You need to kind of prioritize. Like for me, it was like I know I wanted to work at some type of firm as an intern. I didn't really care if it was, and I know I didn't want to do criminal work. But outside of that, I was kind of open. So even though I was saying kind of like firm corporate space, I wasn't saying which particular area of the law. Just get me in any firm and let me kind of figure it out from there. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, excellent advice, Sydney. I want to share a story. Since you started sharing stories, now I want to share a story as well, about finding an internship outside of your career services. One, make sure you're telling everybody what it is that you're interested in. So Sydney talked about church and sports and the like, but also think about your family. I was telling my folks at the time I was interested in sports and entertainment law. So that's all they knew. They were like, this is what my daughter wants to do. And my dad was actually driving for Uber and he had picked up a film producer and he was so proud of me talking about, oh, my daughter's in law school, blah, blah, blah. I think she wants to do what you're doing. And the guy ended up giving him his business card and said, yeah, we will have her if she'll come down here to Texas and be our intern. And it worked out. And it was just really random and on the spot. So you never know what opportunities may be out there for you. But in order to get these opportunities, folks have to know what it is you want to do. If my dad didn't know what I was interested in, he could have just been talking about something else random, but luckily he knew like the key points of what I wanted. And also be flexible because as you guys know, I'm now not working in entertainment, but it was the building blocks that matter. Learning how to do contracts. That's universal everywhere. And I've brought that over to the software industry now. So be very flexible, cast your net wide, as Sydney mentioned. Okay, we have 3 minutes left, so I just wanted to give you guys just 60 seconds each if you have any closing remarks. Terry.
I was just gonna add one quick thing to that, Hope. Like, if you know that you do want to do certain things, like also reach out to those places. Like, there are lots of companies who have internship programs that your career services center may not even know about. Um, I also didn't get any of my jobs or anything like that directly through career services. So, I would say don't be afraid to reach out to, talent acquisition managers, legal groups, and stuff like that of companies. Um, I think my last takeaway would just be to um, be yourself, be approachable, and then also don't be too hard on yourself as far as, when you don't necessarily get it right, like you're still learning, we're all still learning. This is all the conferences that I've gone to, networking is usually some topic at some point. So even people who've been doing this for a long time are still improving their networking skills and everything. So some people, are just naturals and some people have to improve, but I think being yourself is a great way. Let people see who you are and be genuinely interested in who the people are that you're meeting. And I think that'll go far.
Thanks, Terry. Tiffany, you have anything for the last 30 seconds? Any takeaways?
Sure. I think it's important, which Terry echoed a lot, to be kind and approachable and a pleasure to work with. But it's also okay to know that not every personality you come across will be compatible with yours. And so if you feel like, you met a couple folks at a conference or a networking event and you just were not clicking, don't be too hard on yourself. Think through, did I objectively say anything rude or off-putting? If the answer is no, just sort of roll with it and know that you'll find your people that you click with better the more you try to network.
Sounds good. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, please help me give a big round of applause to all of our panelists. Thank you so much for your wisdom, for sharing your stories, for giving your advice. I know I found it incredibly helpful, and I know it was helpful to everybody here on the call. This concludes our panel, Sweet Tea, CLEs, and Connections, starting your legal career in North Carolina. So thank you for joining. And if I could just have our panelists stay on the line for 2 more minutes. Thanks, everybody. Hope you have a great night. Oh, and I should mention one plug for an event tomorrow. If you're still there, we're having coffee and conversation. So we just talking about networking. It's a perfect segue to join us tomorrow at the Bar Center at 5:30. We're celebrating 5 years of our Grab a Coffee program. So if you're a law student or a young lawyer, you probably had a chance to participate in the program over the years, and we'll be celebrating that tomorrow. All right. Thanks, everybody.